Chapter 9. Power Out, Air Gone. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 9 of my What If Hub Survived story. If you're new to this series, click the link in the description below to be taken to the playlist. Now let's begin the next chapter. You're an idiot. I said I was sorry. Lance shoots his brother a glare, only for it to immediately crumble into something much more brittle. Hub is sitting up in the hospital bed, an IV line in his arm, and a heart rate monitor beeping next to him. The attack had been mild, thank goodness, but the doctors still want him to stay overnight for monitoring. Yeah, monitoring. That's what they said last time Hub had an attack. And then he ended up staying in the hospital for 3 straight months. He looks away, trying to keep his voice angry as he grumbles that Hub had apologized for not being more careful. That's not what he wants an apology for. Hub tilts his head in confusion, asking what he could be demanding an apology about then. Lance scowls as a spike of anger makes it easier to keep the other emotions at bay. He tells Hub that that's why he's an idiot. He didn't even think before running in all on his own. Complete moron. Hub frowns, beginning to look a bit annoyed. A slight edge to his voice, he asks Lan what he could have done. Just let Mail and all of the other people on the bus die? Lan whips his head around so fast, Hub actually feels a little concerned about Whiplash. You should have called me, you idiot! Hub blinks, completely taken aback at the sudden shout. Lan never shouts in hospitals. Before he can recover enough to respond, words are spilling out of Lan at rapid fire. Hub sits in complete silence as Lan rambles about how he would have been there in an instant if Hub had just told him. They could have split the lights up between them. Lan could have handled the lights while Hub got help from the cops. They could have worked together and Hub wouldn't be in the hospital right now. There's a long moment of silence as Hub sits completely stunned and Lan breathes hard from his outburst. Then, Hub notices something at the corner of Lan's eyes glinting in the light. Guilt stabs his already fragile heart like a spear made of ice as he realizes that it's tears. Lan never cries. Not since they were little kids. Not since that time when they were 5 and his condition had gotten really bad. It hits Hub like a slap to the face. He really scared his twin. I'm sorry. With the traffic lights out of whack and World 3 behind it, I didn't know if the metro line was safe or even still running. Lan huffs a wet-sounding scoff. Liar, you just didn't think of it. Because you're an idiot. Hey, don't call me out like that! Mega and Rock look at each other through their PET screens before shaking their heads. The operators can be so childish sometimes. Thankfully, Hub is released from the hospital the next day, but not without strict instructions not to exert himself over the next few weeks. Otherwise, he'll need to come in for a much longer stay. The next few days pass by in the pattern that is swiftly becoming the twins' new normal. School, hang out with their 2 separate, yet linked, friend groups, home, net surfing and virus busting. Until the weekend arrives and the twins find themselves unexpectedly bored. Which is a first. Before, they'd always been able to just make their own fun sitting around at home. But now, just doing that didn't have the same feeling as it used to. For the first time in their lives, they straight up didn't know what to do with their spare time. The change was especially strange for Lan, who found himself wishing that Dex and Tori were free to battle today. But Dex is visiting his dad and little brother, and Tori is doing something with his dad. The brothers are sitting outside on a bench in the park with Hub leaning back against it while Lan lies on it upside down when their PETs go off. Checking them together, they see that it's an email from their dad, telling them about a dinner that's being held at the Scilabs that night. Eager for something to do, the boys quickly hop off the bench and head home to tell their mum. Upon hearing about the dinner, she tells the boys that they'll need to get changed into something more appropriate, since it sounds like this is going to be a business dinner. Nodding in understanding, Lan and Hub quickly get changed, moving their net battle stuff into bum bags that wouldn't be considered out of place at a fancy dinner. They may not understand the reasoning behind why people can't just take backpacks into restaurants, especially when it's got all their stuff, including their money, but they've learned not to question it. It just means that they need to prioritize what they bring. The PETs are still fully charged, and they aren't planning on doing much battling, so they can just leave their power packs at home. Same for the new decks they've been experimenting with. If they get bored and want to battle, they'll want to go all out. Honestly, they can just take their PETs and their main deck and they'll be all set. So that's what they do. But even after sorting their things, their mum is still not ready. Calling out down the hall, Lan asks her how much she still needs to do. Haruka calls back, explaining to her boys that she's still looking for a dress, the lovely lavender one Yuichiro got her for their last anniversary. Hub asks if it's the one she put in the hallway cupboard because she didn't have any room in her wardrobe left. Haruka calls back that that's the violet one. Lan checks the time on his PET and frowns. It's already been 30 minutes. Seeming to realize how long she's taking, Haruka tells her boys to go on ahead to Scilabs. She'll catch up as soon as she's found her dress and done her makeup. Calling back and understanding, the boys begin to make their way to Scilabs, shaking their heads at how complicated their mum is making things. You two are friends with Mail. Have neither of you listened to her rants about fashion disasters? We listen. We just don't understand any of it. When the boys arrive at Scilabs, they head over to the TV corner, where their dad said he'd meet them, planning to do some battling to pass the time until he arrives. However, when they enter the space, they immediately spot a familiar head of white and black hair. Lan immediately bristles, muttering a question about what he's doing here. Chord turns to them at Lan's comment, his eyes narrow in suspicion as he says that he could ask them the same thing. The Scilabs is no place for children. Lan scoffs, telling the other boy that he's one to talk since he's the same age as them. At least they've got a reason to be here. What's his excuse? Chord glares at him, preparing to say something biting, when a warm, familiar voice calls out behind the twins. Lan, Hub, you're both here early. The twins spin around to greet their father. Even Lan is sporting one of his small, rare smiles as they greet him. Yuichiro ruffles both his boys' hair before turning to see who they're talking to. Spotting Chord, he smiles at him warmly, asking if he's going to be attending the special dinner that's being held. Chord looks away, grumbling something about needing to represent the net battlers before walking away. Frowning, Lan turns to their dad, asking how he knows that guy. Still smiling, Yuichiro explains that Chord has been spending a lot of time around Scilabs after the incident at the waterworks. He's been looking into the programs that the World 3 has taken and the other super programs that are still out there, trying to find ways to safeguard them and track down World 3. The boy is a very hard worker. Hard-ass is more like it. Hub gently elbows Lan as their father looks around, asking where their mother is. Lan rubs his ribs, shooting a glare at Hub while the other twin explains that their mother was still getting changed when they left. Yuichiro chuckles, knowing Haruka she'll be quite a while. The three males of the family sit down in the TV corner while they wait for the matriarch. To their surprise, it doesn't actually take Haruka that long to arrive, dressed in the very lavender dress that she'd been having so much trouble finding. Reaching them, she apologizes for keeping them waiting before turning to Yuichi. Face softening in that way it does when she's looking at her husband, she asks how he's been doing. If he's been eating properly while pulling all that overtime. His expression soft and loving, Yuichiro assures his wife that he's fine. Before the two adults can continue their loving reunion, Lan clears his throat, drawing their attention. Turning to their sons, the older Hikaris suggest that they get to the party room, their cheeks slightly pink. Nodding in agreement, the twins allow their parents to lead them to the party room. When they arrive, Lan and Hub are stunned by just how fancy the place looks. There are round tables set up all around the room, decorated with fancy lace tablecloths and fully set with plates upon plates of fancy sushi, finger foods that Lan is 80% sure are called some French thing he could never pronounce, drinks, and what looks like the biggest stuffed turkey he's ever seen. Along one wall is a little platform, showing off Scilabs' newest project for visiting investors. Seeing the looks on his sons' faces, Yuichi chuckles before telling them to go make themselves plates. Not needing to be told twice, the twins make their way to the tables as fast as they can without being rude. Once they've filled their plates with an adequate amount of sushi and finger foods for their entrees, they head back to their parents. This dinner is so they can spend time together after all. With no sitting space, the family simply accepts that they're going to need to eat standing up and begin to dig in, sharing stories about what they've been getting up to in the last few weeks. With Lan and Hub strictly sticking to school stuff since their parents already know about the World 3 stuff. They're about halfway through their entrees when Yuichi tells his sons that there's actually something he's been meaning to ask them. Curious, the boys ask what their dad needs. Expression suddenly serious, Yuichi admits that it's to do with his research. Hub frowns in confusion, asking why he's coming to them. After all, they may be doing pretty good in school, but they're still a long way away from being science whizzes like their dad. Yuichi gives a weak chuckle before telling them that it has to do with Mega Man and Rockman. He explains to his sons that Mega and Rock aren't ordinary Navis. Both their programs and their PETs were designed and built by him when Hub and Lan were very young. Before he can continue explaining, Yuichi is interrupted by the Scilabs PA systems calling him to the lab. Yuichi frowns up at the ceiling, like it might somehow contain the answers as to why he's being called away so abruptly. Turning back to his family, he apologizes for having to bail. Again. But it's not usually a good sign when one of the lead scientists is paged to the lab. So he needs to go make sure everything is okay. Lan, Hub, and Haruka wave him off, telling him that they understand. Smiling gratefully, Ryuichi says goodbye before swiftly leaving the room. Well, so much for a night off. At least he was able to eat something. Hub and Lan agree with Mega while they continue to eat. That was honestly the longest meal they've had together in a long time. They continue to munch on the food until another announcement echoes through the room. The announcer calls everyone's attention to the balcony above the platform, which Lan and Hub hadn't noticed, saying that it's time for the evening speaker. Looking up, Lan frowns at the man standing at the balcony. He's wearing a brown suit, which wouldn't be strange if it weren't for the glowing buttons and trim. The man looks like a walking light show. His face also seems to be fixed in a permanent, painfully wide smile. The man greets the guests, thanking them for coming before welcoming them to what he calls the World 3 Party of Death. Lan and Hub stiffen as they hear the title. This can't be good. Sure enough, the man informs them that World 3 has taken over the power plant, so he'd like to get their party started with a nice big blackout. He then calls for his Navi to do something and all the lights go out. Several people scream in fright while Lan and Hub grab onto the table to make sure they don't accidentally wander away in the dark. One of the guests near the wall calls out that the air vents have shut off. Those vents are their only source of oxygen all the way down here. High above them, the man's light suit glows in the dark, a nasty little bit of salt in the fresh wound. He laughs, telling them all to enjoy their final breaths before walking away. Lan and Hub hold still, waiting for their eyes to adjust to the dark. Once they're able to see, they make their way to the door to the hallway. Once they're there, they try to look for a way to get down to the generator on the floor below them. They can't take the lift with the power cut, and they don't know if there are any stairs leading down or even up. They are suddenly struck by the realization of just how dangerous that is, and wonder who designed Scilabs like this. The things you don't realize you need until you need them. Lan is seriously beginning to contemplate digging a hole through the floor when Hub finds a small chute labeled Dust. He remembers one of the scientists talking in the party earlier, that all of Scilab's garbage is thrown into chutes like this to be taken to the power plant and converted into electricity. It might be their only shot. Lan frowns, asking if Hub is sure about doing something like this so soon after the last scare. Hub tells him not to worry, he's perfectly fine right now, and besides, they don't really have any other options. He promises Lan that as soon as he starts to have trouble, he'll head back to the party room. Lan glares at him, telling Hub that if he thinks Lan is going to let him crawl through a dusty and gross chute while he's struggling, he can think again. If Hub starts to struggle, he is to sit his keister down straight away. Hub holds up his hands in surrender, agreeing to Lan's terms. With that, the twins descend down through the shaft to the floor below. When they reach the bottom, they're both coughing from all of the dust, gasping lungfuls of still fresh air as soon as they exit the chute. Lan turns to Hub as he notices that his coughs are a bit harder than Lan's. He asks if Hub is alright, and receives a reassuring response that he's not sure he believes. Still, with no other choice but to press on, they continue down the hall, finding 2 doors. One, made of heavy-duty metal, clearly leads to the generator room, while the other, being opened by a man in a coat, must lead to the control room. Hub tells Lan to go to the control room while he tries to get the generator door open. Lan hesitates, something about the way Hub said it not sitting right with him, but then Hub reminds him what will happen if the power isn't restored soon, and he agrees. Entering the control room, Lan quickly finds a port and prepares to jack Mega Man in, only to be stopped by the scientist he and Hub had seen earlier. The man tells Lan that jacking a Navi in with all of the power out is tantamount to a suicide mission. Without power flowing through the console, the PET will need to draw on its own battery in order to maintain function. And if the PET battery goes out while the Navi is still inside the system, it'll be lights out for Mega Man, permanently. Mega cuts off Lan's spiral before it can begin, telling him that he's willing to take that risk. This is the only chance they've got at getting the power back on before everyone suffocates. Lan nods, jacking in Mega Man. The moment Mega enters the system, Lan can see the sudden drain on the PET. Not wanting to waste any time, they begin the grueling task of finding their way around the system as fast as they can. As if the drain on the battery weren't enough, most of the pathways have been rendered completely invisible thanks to the blackout, while others have been rendered unusable without a battery program. Thankfully, some of the system's progs are able to supply them with some. But even that is a bit of a mine, as several of the once helpful programs have been corrupted by both the blackout and the rampant viruses roaming the area. Lan's heart hammers in his chest as he watches the battery icon in the corner of the PET fall lower and lower. By the time they reach the final segment of the system, it's down to the last 3 units. Lan breathes a sigh of relief as Mega Man places the last battery program in its box and activates the circuit. With that, the door to the generator room should be open. Lan calls Hub, hoping that the action won't drain too much of the PET's battery. He frowns as Hub answers, his voice sounding strange and raspy. He asks his brother if he's okay, but Hub brushes him off, asking if they've managed to find anything. Lan tells him that the door should be open now, a nagging voice at the back of his head telling him that Hub should know that if he's been trying to open it. The sound of something large, heavy, and metal sounds through the PET as Hub walks into the generator room. There's a moment of silence before Hub tells Lan that the power in the generator room is all on. Lan's stomach sinks. If the power outage isn't because the generator has been turned off, then that means that something or someone is siphoning it. Turning back to Mega, he tells the blue Navi to go down the path the battery has just illuminated. It's the only place left that the World 3 Navi could be hiding. Mega agrees, running down the pathway to find a black and yellow Navi pulling electricity from large red conductors around it. The Navi turns to him, telling the smaller Navi that he's too late. He's already finished downloading the electricity program. Mega demands to know what the other Navi is talking about, confusing him. The black and yellow Navi confesses that he'd assumed that Mega was a net battler sent to protect the electricity program. But no matter. He introduces himself as Electman and tells Mega that anyone who stands in his way gets zapped. To prove his point, he aims a bolt of electricity at the ground right next to Mega. Mega jumps away from the bolt, calling for Lan to start getting battle chips ready. Lan calls back an affirmative, sending through Giga Hammer 1. If this Navi's aesthetic is anything to go by, he's going to be a speedy pain in the neck. So chips that are near impossible to avoid are going to be essential in this one. The attack hits, taking a significant chunk out of Electman's health. However, before the Navi and Operator Duo can begin capitalizing on their advantage, Electman raises a hand, drawing a bolt of electricity to him. In an instant, he looks as good as new. Before Mega or Lan can begin to make sense of what just happened, Electman points at Mega and the ground below him begins to glow. Thinking fast, Mega jumps to the right, just as a bolt of electricity strikes down where he'd once been. The moment his feet touch the ground, it begins to glow again, forcing Mega to stay on the move until Electman runs out of lightning bolts. The moment the lightning stops chasing Mega, he turns to face Electman once more, Figuring that he must have had some kind of recovery chip, Mega and Lan strike back with Dynamite 1, only for Electman to once again call down electricity to strike him. Darn it! How is he getting so many recovery chips? Electman chuckles. This is no mere recovery chip, silly little navvy. Electricity is my power, and as long as there's electricity, I'm invincible. Lan's panic spikes before he hears Hub's voice coming through the PET. He'd completely forgotten that the call is still active. Hub's voice is even raspier now as he tells Electman that if that's the case, then he knows just how to fix it. There's a loud click and all of a sudden, Electman's electrical glow disappears. No power? No problem. Lan nods, telling Hub that he's a genius while trying to ignore the ever-tightening knot in his stomach. Turning back to the fight, Lan decides to end it quickly. The PET's battery is almost completely drained and he can't get Hub's raspy voice out of his head. Not playing around, Lan pulls out several Navi chips. Starting with the Woodman 3 Sal had given him last time they hung out, he smirks as he sees the Wood-type chip take an extra chunk of damage to the Electric-type Navi. Next, he uses Gutsman 3, which he'd won off of Dex in their last battle. Then he uses Iceman 2, which he'd gotten from Tori a few days ago. Finally, he decides to finish the battle with a Life Sword. With Electman defeated, Lan is just about to breathe a sigh of relief when a familiar Navi suddenly enters the area. Lan blinks in surprise as Proto Man examines the area where Electman once stood. The red Navi clicks his tongue in frustration, grumbling that there's not a shred of data left. He'd been this close to getting the World 3 server location. He glares at Mega Man and Lan, telling them that if they hadn't interfered, their plan to lure in World 3 would have gone off without a hitch. Lan snarls, demanding to know if that means this whole thing was a trap for World 3. Chord chimes in, confirming just that. He's just about to say something else when Lan cuts him off, calling him just as bad as World 3. Chord bristles. How dare— Oh, I dare you, arrogant pompous prat! Do you have any idea at how many people you put in danger with this little plan of yours? Of all the stupid— Lan cuts himself off. No, this isn't the time to get distracted. As much as he wants to clobber this jerk for everything he's done, there's more important things to do, like get the power back on. Turning his attention away from Chord and Proto Man, Lan calls out to Hub through the still open call, telling him to turn the power back on. His only answer is silence. Hub? You there? Come on, bro, this isn't funny. Hub? Hub! Panic rising like bile in his throat, Lan immediately jacks Mega out, Chord and Proto Man completely forgotten. The moment Mega is back in his PET, Lan yanks the cord out of the port, not caring if either is damaged in the process. He runs down the hall and into the generator room, then, running to the end of the hall, he finds a large switch. Taking a chance, he pushes it up, bringing the power back to the building. The moment the lights are on, Lan sees it. Hub leaning against a nearby railing, his breath short, shallow, and wheezy. Lan runs over to him, scrambling for the frantic beeping that is definitely Rock's PET. Finding it, Lan holds it up to find Rock just as panicked as him. Not mincing words, Rock tells Lan to call for help, right now. Lan's hands are shaking as he calls the one person that has always been able to fix anything. Dad! It's Hub! And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as we find out what's happened to Hub and the World 3 situation takes a turn. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.